You probably think you know what debt is. A mistake, a setback, something that happens when life goes sideways, when you lose a job, when you overspend, when an emergency punches a hole through your savings. Something you're supposed to feel ashamed of, like it's a sign you weren't disciplined enough, responsible enough, smart enough. But what if debt isn't a personal failure at all? What if debt isn't even a problem? What if debt is the point? Because the truth is this: debt is not an accident of the system. Debt is the system. And the reason escaping debt feels impossible is because the world you live in was never designed to let you walk away from it. Most people go their entire lives never realizing this. They think the system is broken, they think it's malfunctioning, they think something went wrong along the way. Like debt became too big, too common, too aggressive. But that's the illusion. That's the trick. The system isn't broken. It's functioning exactly as intended. Debt is the fuel. Debt is the product. Debt is the invisible chain wrapped gently, politely, professionally around your life, tightening just enough to keep you in motion, but never enough to snap. And here's the part nobody ever told you. The global economy only grows when debt grows. Every year, every decade, every generation, the system needs more borrowers, more interest payments, more people quietly drowning under numbers they'll never fully understand. Without debt, the machine stalls. Without debt, the people in power lose control. Think about the first big debt of your life. For many people, it's student loans. You're 17, maybe 18 years old. You barely know how taxes work. You barely know how interest works. But you're told that education is the pathway to freedom, the ticket to a better future. You're encouraged, sometimes pressured, to take tens of thousands of dollars in loans before you even know what you want to do with your life. And why wouldn't you believe it? Every adult around you repeats the same story. Get the degree, get the job, pay back the loans. But what they don't tell you is that the cost of education didn't rise because it improved. It rose because debt became the product universities sell. If they can get you to borrow more, they profit more. A university degree isn't priced according to value. It's priced according to how much debt the average young adult is allowed to take on. Then, once you graduate, you meet your next debt. Credit cards. They don't tell you this in school, but credit card companies don't make money when you pay your bill on time. They make money when you don't. When you slip. When something unexpected happens. When life throws you sideways. That's when interest kicks in. That's when penalties kick in. That's when they finally start to profit. And yet, they market credit cards like they're tools of financial empowerment. Build your credit. Earn rewards. Gain freedom. But behind every slogan is a basic truth. The credit card industry only works if millions of people fail. If everyone paid on time, the entire business model would collapse. Then, there's medical debt, a uniquely American invention. People in other countries hear the phrase medical bankruptcy and struggle to understand what it even means. How could someone lose everything because they got sick? Because they needed surgery? Because they were unlucky enough to be human? But in America, medical debt is one of the largest industries in the country. Hospitals, insurers, drug companies, they all operate on the same logic. The more desperate you are, the more they can charge. And yet again, the system frames it as personal responsibility. If you can't afford treatment, it's your fault. If you go into debt after a medical emergency, it's your fault. If you can't pay a bill no one could reasonably pay, it's your fault. You are shamed for being unable to afford something that was never priced for ordinary people to afford. But the deepest trap, the one almost no one sees, is the mortgage. The American dream. The idea that buying a home is the ultimate sign of adulthood, stability, success. But look closer. A mortgage is a 30-year debt contract. 30 years. Longer than most marriages. Longer than most careers. Longer than the lifespan of most companies. It is the single most powerful mechanism ever designed to ensure people stay tied to their jobs, tied to their lenders, tied to the system. Because people with long-term debt can't take risks. They can't quit their job. They can't start a business. They can't move away. They can't challenge the people who pay them. Debt turns human beings into predictable, compliant, dependable workers. And the people at the top know this. They need the masses to carry long-term debt. It keeps everything stable. It ensures the money system keeps flowing upward, from workers to corporations, from corporations to banks, from banks to investors. But here's the twist most people never realize. Banks don't lend money they have. They create money when they issue loans. When you take out a mortgage, the bank isn't transferring cash from a vault. They are literally creating new money by creating your debt. Meaning the entire money supply is built on the idea that people must keep borrowing forever. If people stop borrowing, money stops being created. If money stops being created, the system collapses. So ask yourself, if debt is the source of new money, if debt is what keeps the economy alive, if debt is what keeps workers in line, why would anyone in power ever want you to escape it? They wouldn't. They don't. The high interest rates, the hidden fees, the penalties, the confusing contracts, these aren't mistakes. They're features. Every part of the system is designed to maximize the amount of time you spend in debt. Ideally, forever. And the cruelest part? They made you believe it was your fault. They made you believe you weren't working hard enough. They made you believe you weren't smart with money. They made you believe you were irresponsible, careless, undisciplined. But think about it. When millions of people across every generation are drowning in debt, is it really a personal failure? Or is it a sign that the system was engineered with one purpose? To keep you owing, paying, struggling. Because a person in debt is predictable. A person in debt is manageable. A person in debt is too busy surviving to question why the world is built this way. And that's the part they don't want you to understand. Your debt isn't a burden. It's their leverage. It is the mechanism that extracts your time, your energy, your freedom. Every interest payment is a piece of your life, sold back to you at a markup. And once you see it, once you understand the architecture of the trap, you can't unsee it. You start to notice how normalized debt is. You start to notice how aggressively it's marketed. You start to notice how everything essential, education, healthcare, housing, transportation, is priced just high enough that people have no choice but to borrow. Debt isn't a financial instrument. It's a behavioral instrument. It shapes your life. It shapes your decisions. It shapes your future. And yet, despite all of this, there is a way out. But it doesn't start with money. It starts with understanding. Understanding how the trap works. Understanding why it exists. Understanding the rules they never taught you, because teaching you the rules would set you free. Because once you stop believing the lie that debt is your fault, the lie that debt is normal, the lie that debt is the price of opportunity, the illusion cracks. And when illusions crack, systems lose their power. This is where the real story begins. But before we talk about escaping the debt trap, you need to understand one more truth. The truth they work hardest to bury. Debt isn't just tolerated by the system. Debt is celebrated by the system. Encouraged, incentivized. Because every time you take on debt, someone else collects a guaranteed stream of income from your future. You become a revenue source, not a customer, not a citizen, a financial asset. It's not a coincidence that almost everything in modern life is structured around monthly payments. Subscriptions, financing plans, loans, installments, recurring billing. You're not meant to buy things anymore. You're meant to rent them, to lease them, to borrow them. Because ownership makes people secure, but payments make people obedient. Look at the car market. It used to be simple. Save money, buy a car, own the car. But today, most new cars are leased. The average car loan lasts 7 years, longer than many people keep the vehicle. And the moment one loan ends, another begins. People upgrade not because they need to, but because the system pushes them toward constant payments. The price of new cars skyrocketed not because manufacturing suddenly became more expensive, but because it became profitable to keep people financing cars forever. You're not supposed to finish paying. You're supposed to roll debt into more debt, stretching it across your life like a financial shadow. Housing works the same way. Homes used to cost 2 or 3 times a family's income. Today, they cost 6, 8, sometimes 10 times. Why? Because the more you borrow, the more banks profit. The more expensive homes become, the more decades you spend tied to a mortgage. And the more decades you spend tied to a mortgage, the more predictable your behavior becomes. You can't strike. You can't protest. You can't take risks. You can't slow down. You must keep paying. Debt becomes the quiet supervisor standing behind you at all times, whispering, pressuring, reminding you that freedom is something you must earn month after month after month. And if you ever stop, it all collapses. They take the car, they take the house, they take the little stability you built. That's not freedom. That's conditional survival. And yet, the illusion is maintained through one simple mechanism: shame. People stuck in debt blame themselves. They hide. They avoid talking about it. They avoid asking for help. They internalize guilt and embarrassment so deeply that they never question the system itself. That's why the debt trap works. Not because the math is complicated, but because the culture surrounding it is weaponized. But here's the secret the system never wanted you to realize. Debt loses its power the moment you stop being ashamed of it. Shame keeps you obedient. Shame keeps you isolated. Shame keeps you from understanding that millions of other people are experiencing the same struggle. Debt is not a personal flaw. It's a structural expectation. And once you detach your self-worth from your financial burden, your relationship to money begins to shift. You start to see debt for what it really is: a tool. A dangerous tool, yes, but a tool nonetheless. One that can trap you, or one that can be used strategically. The wealthy have always known this. They borrow money constantly. They use debt to buy assets, to grow businesses, to build wealth. Their debt makes them richer, while everyone else's debt makes them poorer. The difference isn't discipline, it's knowledge, understanding, context. Most people are taught to use debt as a lifeline, a way to survive emergencies or cover gaps when wages fall short. But the wealthy use debt as leverage, a way to buy time, buy assets, buy freedom. The system punishes one group for using debt and rewards the other. And here's the irony: the wealthy rarely use their own money. The system allows them to borrow cheaply, invest aggressively, and offload the risk onto everyone else. Meanwhile, ordinary people borrow expensively and pay eternally. High interest for the poor, low interest for the rich. Penalties for the poor, loopholes for the rich. Restriction for the poor, freedom for the rich. Two groups playing the same game, but by completely different rules. So what does escaping the debt trap actually look like? It doesn't mean becoming rich overnight. It doesn't mean paying off every debt instantly. It doesn't mean working yourself into exhaustion. It means rewiring the way you see money and the way you see yourself within the system. The first shift is realizing that money is not the goal. Freedom is the goal. Control is the goal. The ability to decide what your time is worth and how you want to live is the goal. Debt steals that freedom by taking ownership of your future. Escaping debt, therefore, isn't just financial, it's psychological. When you understand the system, you stop fighting the wrong battles. You stop trying to budget your way out of structural inequality. You stop believing that cutting coffees and skipping lunches will magically solve decades of economic manipulation. You stop believing that you're one good financial habit away from breaking a trap that was meticulously engineered long before you were born. You start focusing on the mechanisms of control instead of the distractions of blame. You start looking at interest rates, income inequality, the housing market, the cost of education, the power of banks, the structure of wages. You begin to see the pattern. Everything that matters became more expensive at the exact same time economic mobility began to collapse. That's not a coincidence, that's design. And when you finally see the design, something incredible happens. The fear begins to fade. Not all at once, not magically, but gradually. You begin to reclaim mental space that debt once occupied. You begin to see possibilities instead of pressure. And that's the moment you become dangerous. Not to yourself, not to your finances, but to the system that relied on your compliance. Because a person who understands the rules is a person who can start bending them. You start to realize that debt is negotiable. Interest is negotiable. Payments are negotiable. Even the system itself is negotiable. People don't escape debt by being perfect. They escape it by becoming informed. By understanding how lenders think, how banks operate, how repayment structures work. By learning the strategies that wealthy people use every day, not because they are special, but because they were taught the rules you were never meant to see. And here's the real twist. Escaping debt isn't about eliminating every burden. It's about reducing the burdens that drain your freedom and increasing the choices that expand it. It's about turning the tables on the system that profited from your confusion. It's about finally understanding that money was never the measure of your worth, and debt was never the measure of your failure. Debt was the plan. Debt was the expectation. Debt was the invisible script you were handed the moment you became an adult. But now you see the script, and once you see it, you can rewrite it. Not because the system will change for you, but because you can change your relationship to the system. You can stop playing the role of the struggling debtor and start playing the role of the informed participant. You can stop reacting and start strategizing. You can stop fearing money and start understanding it. Because once you understand money, debt loses its power. Once you understand debt, the system loses its leverage. And once the system loses leverage, you gain something far more valuable than financial stability. You gain autonomy, you gain clarity, you gain the ability to decide your own direction. In a world built on debt, the greatest act of rebellion is understanding. And once you understand, you realize something profound. You were never supposed to escape debt. But now that you see how the trap works, you can walk out of it with your eyes open. Not instantly, not easily, but deliberately, consciously, and permanently. Because the real freedom was never in paying off the debt. The real freedom was in seeing the illusion. And illusions only work as long as you believe them.